let's get on with it then. So here we are. The bottom's off, the roaches have been cleaned out. We're going to do an RCA swap, and as usual, we always do a ground swap. Here's the ground wire that this has come in with, and it's a little short. And it looks like someone's done an aftermarket job. They've replaced the original wires with this blue rig here. So that's always an indicator of fun things to come. We'll see if they did a good job or not. I'm going to undo the RCA clamper and spacer, as we do. In case you're wondering, I keep all my screws in this little magnetic bowl. It's got a magnet underneath, and this is absolutely necessary. I would say even if you're a home gamer, get one of these things. They're really cheap on Amazon now, and they're so helpful, and they really will save you so much heartache later on down the road. Okay, so here's the RCA clamper, and I'm gonna, if there's a little tab on the side, I'm gonna put my screwdriver in. I'm gonna just lightly pry it up, and that will separate it from the bottom. This is, I should say, this is the RCA clamper officially. This is the spacer, and I'm actually surprised that it's in here. Most people who work on RCAs at home just throw it away because they can't figure out how to return it to its original position. All right, so out comes the plate. And usually cockroaches love to be in there too, so we'll see. Yes, we definitely have roaches. Fun. Ugh, can you see that? They're in there. This is what I'm talking about. So you'll see this corrosion. This is from bugs. They're always little dots, and they're about the shape of a I hate to make this a biology experiment, but they're about the shape of a baby roach, and that's in the metal. So if we wanted to get rid of that, we'd have to resurface the metal. We'd probably have to etch it with some sort of acid product or something. I don't know. I'm not too keen on machining, so someone who knows more can tell me. All right, so we're gonna vacuum. And I made an entire cup of nice coffee, and I'm realizing all the roach dust went right in the direction of that cup. So I'm gonna hit pause and make a new cup. Okay, cool. So new coffee has been poured and put way over there. So we'll see this sometimes. This is a piece of felt with some sticky on it. It's usually set over at the factory. It's been placed over the connections to the tone arm wires. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Put my little soldering iron cleaner within eye shot here. I definitely want to see, I want to show you how much we clean the soldering iron. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is just kind of move some stuff out of the way. So I'm going to be very gentle. So you can see these wires here, these are the tone arm wires, and they're really tiny, so they're easy to break. So we're going to be very, very easy on them. So whoever did the RCA job in the past who used these blue wires actually did a pretty decent job. They used the zip tie like they were supposed to. Not too bad. So there's a couple things we could do. Should we do the zip tie? Should we eliminate the zip tie first or undo the soldering? I say let's undo the soldering first. The zip tie adds a little extra strength to our assembly, which we may need, and I'll show you why in just a second. So let me grab actually a solder sucker. We're going to use this solder sucker right here. I'm going to clean the tip, add some heat, start here. And we're just getting the solder sucker just kind of nearby. What it's doing is just, it's moving air really quickly. It's not, there are some higher quality models solder sucker, but this is getting us where we need to be. So it just kind of sucks the loose solder into the tip, or yeah, up into kind of like this area, and then we release the plunger, and it resets. Okay, that's looking good. So now now that most of the solder has been removed, I'm going to just kind of remove each part one by one. Just kind of get them out of the way. All right, so they're good. Now, here's the reason why we waited to remove this zip tie. If I had removed the zip tie first, all of the weight of this cable would be on these joints right here, on these solder pads, solder joints. And it's a risk that the weight of the cable may actually rip them off, because all these are just, they're just traces of copper on a fiberglass board. They can actually come undone and rip off of the board, and then we're in trouble. So if I can do whatever I can to reduce any stress to that area, I'm going to do it. So that's what we did. We left that on there. We left the zip tie holding the cable down. We did our surgery, and now that the cable is gone, or the cable's been unsoldered, there's no fear of putting any undue stress on that area. So far so good. Next step is I'm going to remove the traces of solder using my solder wire here. Let's get the old stuff off. Okay, so this is just your standard desoldering braid. It's just kind of woven, little tiny woven bits of copper impregnated with rosin or some sort of chemical that helps the solder soak up into it. So I add heat through the solder braid, and it looks like I'm scrubbing. I'm not. I'm really just kind of just rubbing it over the surface of the solder pad there. I don't want to apply too much pressure. Sometimes I like to add a little solder on top of it, and that helps the solder flow even more. But I think we're getting it done as is. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, cool. There's some trace. You can see that there's some goo, some shmoo on the PC board here. Let's get rid of this, by the way. And what that is rosin. That's partly from the rosin that's kind of leached out of the solder joint that was there. Some of it's come out of our desoldering braid. And it's not life or death, but we're going to get it cleaned up. So I'm going to use a little bit of this paper towel and some 99% isopropyl alcohol, and just very gently clean it. Not scrubbing really hard. The alcohol is going to do most of the work for us, so that's all we need to do. And you can see that's what's left. Okay, that's good. Before I get the new RCAs on there, let's remove the old ground wire. So again, being very gentle. So on the Technics 1200, it came out of the factory with the ground wire underneath this board. You can see that it kind of comes in here, it goes underneath and makes contact here at this ground point. There are some older models of 1200 that were a little bit different, but most of them that you'll see, I think, that were manufactured at least in the 90s and beyond, were manufactured like this. So I'm going to bring my solder sucker back and add some heat. Being careful of the tiny wires underneath. And when I see the iron start, the lead start, the solder, become molten, and I know it's liquid, solder sucker, you can see now there's or maybe you can't, but I've cleaned that. There's a solder joint that I can see through now. I can see through that hole in that little lug there. Now I'm going to use desoldering braid to get the rest of it. Okay. And now there's a couple ways I can just kind of try and pull this out, but instead I'm going to clip off the excess wire. And so I'm left with this little kind of rat tail, and that is way easier to work with. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab it, apply a little more heat to the joint, And that should just come right out. And it wants to. It's moving around on me. It's barely hanging in there. Let's see. There we go. Okay, cool. So far so good. You can see there's another wire that was sharing that same point, and that's the ground wire that attaches to the chassis.